That at some points you had to compromise, at some points you had to persuade and say, okay, I'm doing this because, and explain your motivations. And sometimes it could be like, okay, so you want me to write, for example, a sonata. Okay, if this is a technical requirement, then technically you present something which is a sonata, but you work with it in your own way.
So we're here with Adrian Mocanu, our artist in residence, our GreenHaven artist in residence, and we have these informal opportunities to come together and meet our resident and ask him a few questions. So Adrian, thank you so much for being here with us and being our artist in residence.
Thank you for inviting me.
Our pleasure. And I'd like to just start with your background, start with your childhood, and ask you where you grew up. Maybe you can tell us something about your family, something about your childhood experiences.
Okay, so, well, first of all, it's important to say that I'm a music composer, something that, to understand where I was born in Kyiv, in Ukraine. My family, on my father's side, has Romanian roots. That's why my last name is absolutely Romanian, and my name is also sounds a little bit Romanian. But despite these roots, I was born in the Ukrainian capital, so I grew up in a completely, let's say, Ukrainian context. Starting from, I was born in 1989, so, and yeah, that's it.
Musical family?
Yes, on my father's side, everyone was a musician, so on the other side of my family, on my mother's side, everyone was like architecture and visual arts.
Oh, interesting.
So it was a mixture. I didn't know if I was going to be doing music. Actually, my parents decided not to pressure me in any way. So they didn't make me go to music school when I was a child. They told me, okay, if you don't want to, you don't have to be obliged to do anything. And it took me quite a lot of time to actually understand, okay, this is what I want to do. So I was 18 years old when I started actually learning music, which is a lot of time, you know. And there was a lot of to catch up.
What would be, for other composers, would they have gone to the very strenuous music education school starting at 6 or 7? Is that a normal trajectory for a composer in Ukraine?
Yeah, absolutely. First you go to music school, then you go to music college, then you go to conservatory. So it's like 15, 12, 20 years of endless work. But I think it's possible to do it the other way. So there were, in the history of music, many composers who didn't go that path in a way that everyone else was doing it. You can do it in your own way as well.
Do you think there are benefits to not going through the strenuous music school?
No, I think there are things that you have to learn, whether you like it or not, but you have to know it. The other question is if you are going to use it, but you have to know that these are the things that I don't want to use, and you have to have your reasons and motivations to not to use them.
Right.
So it's not like you cannot be detached from some aspects of theory. You have to know that. You have to know it, and then decide what you're going to do with it.
And when you say you had to catch up, how did that take place? You just had to put in more hours than your colleagues in the university level? Or
I had to prepare in order to enter the conservatory. I had to pass all the exams and all the musical theory and all the piano and all the whatever. So it took me like maybe more than 3 years to prepare. And I was taking lessons privately and also lessons in music composition. And I had to prepare my compositional portfolio in order to enter. And I had to do it just like everyone else.
What was the initial motivation to decide music as opposed to, for example, architecture? How did you come to the decision?
It actually started with, so I was attending organ concerts, and so we have like this St. Nicholas Cathedral in Kyiv, which functioned until recently as a concert hall and not as a sacred place. And there were concerts of organ music there, and I was going there, and they were playing different types of music, but also contemporary music. And the first time when I heard Messiaen, I was like, okay, I was completely, shocked and impressed. And slowly I started investigating it on my own. I started discovering composers and listening to things. And then I realized, okay, so maybe it's not just about listening, maybe you want to do something about it. And also one of the important things that influenced me was actually the Dr. Faustus novel by Thomas Mann.
Fantastic.
Yeah, because of this funny
This
coincidence.
funny episode where Emil Kretschmer, right, or the organist stuttering, making his way through Beethoven Opus 111. Is that what you mean?
No, the Dr. Faustus about a composer whose name was also Adrian. It was like a coincidence. Yeah. And so, and I think, I was like, okay, maybe I should give it a try.
So interesting. So what was it about Adrian Leverkus that drew you to?
Oh, well, it's funny because if you read the book, there's like, okay, there's the man who sold his soul to the devil.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds interesting. I'm not saying that there is like something that I want to do like bad now. Just when I read that book, sometime after, it just happened naturally. That's all.
Mm. So interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a fantastic entrance into composition.
Yeah.
And I wonder if there's any connection, perhaps because Dr. Faustus is describing, I guess, is a fictional biography of Schoenberg, so
Yeah.
there's something about your musical trajectory which aligns very seamlessly, I would say, with some German historical structures. Can I say that? Do you identify closely with German composers, or were there German composers that you were drawn to?
I think when I started my musical studies, I think from the very beginning I understood that, okay, I have to find my own way. I'm not going to do it in the context of traditional musical education. I'm not going to limit it just to the conservatory. So I started attending master classes, workshops, international workshops, and participating in these events where you had like invited professors from other countries, and many of these invited professors were German and Austrian. And I think at some point when you have Beat Vogel as an invited professor, it influences you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in that context, yes. So not through my main musical institution where I was studying, but through extracurricular activities.
Mm-hmm. And would you cite Piotr as a main influence, or are there other composers?
There were many. No, not only Beat Vogel, there was also Raphael Stengel, for example. That was actually a project simultaneously where you got to work with the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so opposite, so interesting actually to compare these two approaches. So I'm not trying to limit myself just to one thing. I'm trying to keep it all in mind and then discover what are the things that define you.
When you were studying in Kyiv, was there a clear indication about this is how you go about the process of becoming a composer? Was there a clearly delineated structure of how you do it, and then you were finding influences from here and here that perhaps came in conflict with the academic proposal of how to become a composer?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a teacher, my composition professor, who gave me a very solid base.
Mm-hmm.
He taught me things, but also when it comes to the aesthetical issue, the musical language, then I think it's important to give the student some freedom. You don't have to require them to follow some aesthetical issues. Give them knowledge and give them the freedom to do it. And in that case, I realized that, okay, I can take from what I need, but also don't make me follow the rules that you made up. So I had to defend my right to do it my way.
Yeah. And what did that defending look like? Did you sacrifice some relationships when in your studies because you insisted on autonomy in your creative process?
I have to. It's not always like that. At some points you had to compromise. At some points you had to persuade and say, okay, I'm doing this because, and explain your motivations. And sometimes it could be like, okay, so you want me to write, for example, a sonata. Okay, if this is a technical requirement, then technically you present something which is a sonata, but you work with it in your own way. So, and I think, okay, at some point it is useful to get this knowledge that you know how to do it, but then you are free.
Yeah.
So you don't have to write sonatas all the time. I think at some point, okay, you can do one as a educational project, and then, okay, then you're free.
And you're free from academia for about, you mentioned in the talk the other night that you were out of school for 10 years. Is that correct? Or
No, not exactly.
Sorry.
10 years ago, I became the first year, the student of the first year.
Ah, okay.
So that piece that I was showing during
Yeah.
that presentation was my piece that I wrote to enter the conservatory.
Oh, okay. And having now a body of works outside of your studies, are you developing a process which is internally cohesive for your way of working, or are you also, for every piece, identifying new ways, new paradigms, new working modalities, or do you find that there's an Adrian Mocanu process that's developing in your postgraduate years?
I think both, because on the one hand, of course, there are things that characterize you that you feel connected to. So there is like your way of doing things. But I don't want to limit myself just to one thing. So you have to challenge yourself all the time. And every piece is a challenge. And when you start a new piece, there is this moment when you don't know. And you have to discover it. You have to go through it. And it's not a pleasant process in most of the cases. So, I mean, yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult. Sometimes you even have to suffer, well, not physically, but as a creator, you have to go through this creative suffering. And then, at some point, if you find it, then this is the identity of the piece. And I think each piece should be different. So they're like, well, I'm saying like you're raising them, and then when they are ready, you let them go, and they start living their own life.
I hear a very strong child analogy.
Yeah.
You're raising your pieces, and then you let your pieces go.
Yeah,
So
and then they start living on their own.
As a in the compositional process, like at what point do they become autonomous individuals?
After the performance?
After the performance.
Yeah.
Interesting. So not during the compositional process.
No.
Yes, they're still young children.
When the score is ready,
Uh-huh.
it's presented to the performers. Okay, after the rehearsals, you made some corrections,
Uh-huh.
and then okay, yeah, the piece is there.
And it's out in the world.
It's out.
Yeah. And that means that for the subsequent performances, your children pieces are independent. of
Yeah,
you.
they're independent, and when after some time you get to listen to another performance of your piece that you wrote a few years ago, it's an interesting experience. So I mean, it's a good thing that they're being repeated. So it's not like there is a very bad joke in Ukraine that when there is a premiere, they say, okay, this piece is being performed twice today, the first and the last time. So I think it's good that the pieces get this opportunity to be played and replayed and re-performed, and but they are the way they are. So if you get another performance of the piece, I'm not trying to change anything, because at that point I was this person. So it's like meeting yourself from a few years ago.
Yeah.
You just have to accept it and think about, okay, if you don't like something, or if you do like something, think about how you can use it in the next piece. But don't try to change what was already done.
Don't try to apply yourself from today on yourself from 10 years
Just,
ago.
you have to reflect and make conclusions. You have to think. And maybe in the next piece that you're going to write, it can influence you somehow, or not. Or not.
I hear a really strong encounter with the work, it almost sounds like it's a being or an individual, that it's not a piece of paper and a pen or a computer, however your working way is, but that you're encountering something when you compose something, that it's something that sits in front of you and you engage with it. Does that make sense, or is that a good way of interpreting?
In a way, I think, perhaps.
Sometimes, yes. I'd like to, I want to open it up for questions, but I want to ask one line of questions with regard to being here in Germany under very historically strained situations. How has your experience been as a Ukrainian composer living in, first of all, Spain, now Germany for a couple months as our artist in resident, and first of all on a personal level, and then perhaps how it's entering into your compositional structures and processes?
Well, so there are a few aspects. There could be like a technical aspect, like, or maybe even the aspect of organization, like how you get your music played, or if you can get some projects, or if you can apply for funding or something like that. That's one thing. And the other thing is how this environment influences you as an artist, and how you can transform it, how you can transform your experience into something that eventually becomes a piece. So in the first context, I would say that, of course, in Germany you have some possibilities to make it happen. There are programs that you can apply to. In Spain you have less, and it's mostly limited. You have to speak Spanish if you don't speak Spanish, and of course, every program has their own like rules. If you can follow the rules, then you might compete in that. It's a competition, always a competition. But it depends on each country. So I think, it's never easy. It's never, like, there are always a lot of people that you have to compete with. And sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not. I just developed a rule which is like, okay, if you send like 50 applications, which is actually a lot of work, then 2 of them might be successful. And you have to be prepared to receive 48 rejections. And that shouldn't stop you from going on. You just have to realize, okay, you didn't get it, not because what you do is bad, but just because the situation and the jury and I don't know what was different. And that's it, but it doesn't define your work as in something that's like you're not worth it. You have to go on, and for every rejection you have to prepare yourself to send 5 more applications and go on. And on the level of how it influences me, well, yeah, I do feel connected with I'm really connected like with Romance languages and with, this Mediterranean cultures, and with Spain particularly. So if you live there and if you try to transform it into your experience, I think it's interesting. Well, I've never lived in Germany before getting this residency, so I'm still trying to think about how it can influence me. There hasn't, I think with more time I could see how it goes.
Yeah.
So it's been only 3 weeks.
It's only been 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It's hard to make just to deduce like what the culture is in 3 weeks, or to understand how it works on you, how it affects you. I don't want to ask all the questions, so if anybody else has any questions.
Well, I would be very interested just to follow that train of thought a little bit. Do you think that where you live, where you are at the moment, has an influence on what you write? Or are you, okay, I'm Adrian and I have my own ideas of composing, I can compose anywhere in the world?
Of course I can compose anywhere. I think this process is actually more complicated than it is. I think if where you are at this moment, if everything around you is good, then what you write might be not that good. So it's like you have to have these conditions that will make you uncomfortable in a way, and then you can transform it into an experience that would be interesting. So, I mean, on the one hand, of course, it's good to have like good living conditions, but on the other hand, you can understand that, yeah, if the conditions that surround you make you suffer in a way, then you can transform it as this experience. And sometimes it's not like a one-day situation. So, okay, so for example, today is a bad day, so I'm going to write a good piece. No, this stays like deep down inside you, and maybe in some time you can transform it. So it's really a complicated process. I don't know how it works like 100%. I can just like make observations.
There are obvious examples like Messiaen, when he was in a work camp writing the quatuor, very adverse circumstances and producing a work of great quality. And we were talking ahead about the composers in exile, people like Schoenberg and Korngold going to California, or Gaude to New York, and how that affected how they wrote. Some of them integrated, some of them absolutely didn't integrate, and yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, for example, if we talk about the situation after February 24th, 2022, then of course, it influenced everyone, and it influenced me as a composer, and I'm still processing this. So it's not like, okay, today the war started, and it's like not like you're going to start writing about it immediately. You have to have time to evaluate this, to think about it, and then eventually, well, in my case, what influenced me a lot were the air raid sirens that I was hearing for the first 4 months, and then when I got this opportunity to leave, to get away from it, then I realized, okay, they're actually haunting me. So I'm trying to, they appear just in every piece that I write out of nowhere. Like, okay, now you have these sirens. And this is something that I think, like, it leaves a mark that stays with you.
I was thinking of the word you used, integration, and also thinking about Kaya Saryahu, who recently passed away, and she said that she was always a Finn in France. So she never felt integrated, but she felt that that was something that helped her to have a perspective of somebody a bit outside. Would you say that you're looking in these opportunities that you have now to integrate into whether it's Germany or Spain, or is there a certain value for you in having the perspective of an outsider within this context?
Well, I don't know. I think I was an outsider in Ukraine all the time, so it's not like... I think you just have to get used to being an eternal outsider whenever you are. It's not like, okay, today I'm living in this country, so I'm like writing, I don't know, I'm writing German music, and then I move to France and I'm writing French music. No, that would not be my case, I think. So you're just discovering who you are, and you get to live with it. Regardless, of course, the mentality of the country where I grew up and where I spent many years, like 28, of course it influences you, but it does not define you completely. So there are many aspects that define you.
Yeah.
How much are you inspired by musicians who play your pieces, or in the case of wanting to write or having? Or is it important for you to have a certain way of playing from might be one instrumentalist or one soloist or a singer or a choir or an orchestra? Do you have this aesthetic of influence your work, the work you're going to write?
Well, I think in some cases, if you have a collaboration with a performer, or it's a commission, or I don't know, then of course it might influence you. In my case, there was a collaboration with a Spanish pianist, Ricardo Descalzo, for who I wrote the piece for solo piano. where you have to play the piano with bow hair. And since I knew that this is the performer, which is specialized in contemporary music, and he's going to do it absolutely marvelously, I knew, okay, I can challenge the instrument and myself and the performer in this way, because I knew 100% that there would not be any other pianist that would be able to do it, who would agree to do it. In that case, if you get this like special occasion to work with performers who can challenge it, who can technically and aesthetically challenge this type of music and have the capacity to understand it, then yeah, you feel like you're responsible. Or for example, when I got a commission from the Warsaw Autumn Festival in 2019, you feel responsible. It's like you have to write a big piece, and you know, okay, I'm going to write this piece and it's going to be performed at the Warsaw Autumn Festival with such rich history. It's a great responsibility, and I was like, okay, yeah, I have to do something. I cannot just present an average piece for that. No, it has to be the best that I can do at this moment.
It's motivating.
Yeah, very,
Motivating, actually.
yeah.
Well, I think.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Adrian, for being here and for answering questions and for contributing to this program, the GreenHaven Artist Residencies. We're really happy to have you.
I'm looking forward to do more projects here.
You're welcome. Thanks everybody for being part of our process.
Thank you for hosting.